Have you ever heard English speakers say something like, "It seems to me that you're apparently mistaken, I think"? Listening to that statement, you might wonder if the speaker actually does know if there has been a mistake made or not, because the language is so vague. However, the meta message implied in this statement is that the speaker doesn't want to offend the listener by stating too aggressively that the listener is incorrect. This is a commonly used politeness tactic called hedging. In this video, we're going to talk about how to sound more like a native speaker by using what's called hedging. So the objective is that by the end of this video, you will be able to describe what hedging is and how to use it. So first of all, what is a hedge? Well, by definition, a hedge is a word or phrase that makes statements less forceful or assertive. In other words, it helps you to distance yourself from facts and opinions if you don't want to come across too strongly. This type of language is often neglected by English learners because they might not understand how common it is to use these hedges, especially when we're trying to be polite and diplomatic, or if we don't want to state something too strongly because you know you can't actually prove it. So you may be surprised to hear that the ability to use this type of language has been argued by researchers to be even more important for communication than our grammatical competence. This is because being able to communicate your message with all its nuances into the correct socio-cultural context is essential for effective communication. A misplaced preposition can easily be overlooked, but not knowing how to be polite to your listeners beyond saying please and thank you won't really get you very far. Many English learners who are quite adept at being precise and correct in their speech still are not able to communicate their communicative goals because they aren't able to be what's called strategically vague. This is actually the case in both speaking and writing. As you might have guessed, hedging is very frequently found in business speech. Research by Cambridge University Press and the University of Birmingham in the UK on a database of business English found that a significant proportion of the language used in business contexts, such as meetings, was actually composed of hedging. The research showed that the reasons business people use hedging are similar to the reasons your average speaker would do. Because you might be uncertain about something that you're talking about, or you want to be polite. For example, you might say, "As I understand things, there seems to be a fair amount of a sort of business to be discussed in today's meeting." In this statement, by using phrases like, "as I understand things," "there seems to be," "a fair amount," and "sort of," you're signaling to the people listening that you aren't really feeling very confident or certain about the things to be discussed in the meeting. But you are taking responsibility for this by using, "as I understand things," really to preface the whole statement. Rather than saying there's a lot of business to talk about today, you use the modal auxiliary "seems to be," and then the qualifying adjective "fair" as in fair amount, and "sort of" to soften the fact that there's a lot of business that really needs to be discussed today, but you aren't very certain about it. Business people also use hedging frequently because they want to be indirect in their speech, as this is considered quite polite in English. For example, if you need something to be done, but you don't want to appear to be giving out orders to someone and risk inadvertently offending them, then hedging is a polite way to accomplish this. You could say something like, "So in this week's meeting, you need to sort of find out who's who." So here, by sort of qualifying the instructions, you're again softening your statement to your listeners and being more polite. So to summarize, in a business context, hedging is primarily used to show you are uncertain about something you're talking about, avoid being impolite, and to express something indirectly. Now let's talk about the language used in hedging. So how do you use hedging? What is it comprised of? Well, you can create the vague or uncertain language that you need in hedging by using modal auxiliary verbs, like may, might, can, and could, to name a few. You can also use modal verbs like seem to or appear to. Quantifying adjectives and probability adjectives are also helpful. Words like some, a lot, and many are examples of quantifying adjectives, while possible, probably, and likely or unlikely are examples of probability adjectives. There are also adverbs of degree, like perhaps, apparently, and presumably, that are all helpful in hedging. But you might have noticed that in the examples I gave earlier in this video, the hedging wasn't really very complicated. In fact, the most commonly used hedges from the business corpus I referred to earlier were I think and sort of. However, I do have to point out that native speakers of English will often combine the phrase I think with other hedging language like maybe, or with modals like seems to create a statement like, I think that maybe it seems that the shipment might not have arrived on time, when, for example, we're reporting to a supplier that a promised shipment was late. This helps to soften the message considerably, and it gives your reader some face when you report on bad news. And it enables both parties to maintain the relationship rather than having to confront your supplier overtly and maybe possibly terminating the business relationship. So be polite. As you can see, hedging in business is a communicative tool that all business people need to really make an effort to excel in. I hope by the end of today's video you feel more able to describe what exactly a hedge is and can hopefully begin to use some of these more sophisticated language structures so you can be more strategically polite and vague if necessary.